Welcome back to Rippled Mind, the podcast where we explore transformative ideas that challenge the way we think about health, longevity, and the future. I'm your host, Mike Bradley.
And I'm Jessica. Today, we're diving into a topic that affects every single one of us: aging. But we're not just talking about wrinkles and gray hair. We're exploring how our mindset can shape the way we age and what science has to say about it.
That's right. And to guide us through this fascinating conversation, we're looking at the groundbreaking work of Dr. Ellen Langer, a Harvard psychologist who's been called the mother of mindfulness. Her research challenges the idea that aging is an inevitable decline and instead shows us how staying mentally engaged and open can transform the way we grow older.
In fact, if you're a fan of neuroscience and longevity, you might already know that Dr. Langer recently appeared on the Huberman Lab podcast with Dr. Andrew Huberman. They had an incredible discussion about mindfulness, perception, and how these concepts apply to aging. So, whether you've heard that episode or not, we'll be diving deep into her work today.
So grab your coffee, tea, or whatever keeps you going, because this episode is packed with insights you won't want to miss. Let's get into it. First things first, who is Dr. Ellen Langer? Well, she's a professor of psychology at Harvard University and one of the pioneers in studying mindfulness in Western psychology. Her work spans decades, with a few books including The Mindful Body.
Dr. Langer explains that we often have chronic health issues because we've built mental frameworks that limit our physical well-being. For example, when we assume that getting older automatically means a decline in health, we start to feel the effects of that belief. But if we change that mindset, by challenging our assumptions and becoming more mindful of how we think about our bodies, we can actually improve our health.
Dr. Langer's probably best known for her Counterclockwise Study, which blew people's minds back in 1979.
Yeah, I've heard about that study. It's wild. She took a group of men in their late 70s and early 80s and basically turned back time for them. They lived in a retreat designed to look like it was 1959, and they acted as if they were 20 years younger, talking about current events from that era, dressing the part, you name it.
And here's the kicker. They didn't just feel younger. After just 1 week, these men showed measurable improvements in physical strength, flexibility, posture, vision, hearing, you name it. Some even looked visibly younger in photographs taken after the experiment.
It's like they rewrote their own biology just by changing their mindset. That's powerful stuff. And if you listen to her recent interview on the Huberman Lab podcast, you'll know that Dr. Langer emphasized how perception plays a huge role in this process. She explained that when we shift our focus away from limitations and toward possibilities, our bodies and minds respond accordingly.
Exactly. Huberman also pointed out how this ties into neuroscience, how our brain essentially updates based on the signals we give it. If we tell ourselves we're capable and strong, our neural pathways adapt to support that belief. It's mind-blowing, really.
That brings us to another big theme in Dr. Langer's work: mindfulness. Now, when most people hear mindfulness, they think meditation or yoga, but Langer's definition is broader than that. For her, mindfulness means being present, attentive, and open to new possibilities.
And this was a major point in her conversation with Huberman. He asked her about the difference between traditional mindfulness practices, like sitting quietly and focusing on your breath, and her approach, which is more about actively engaging with the world around you.
Right. Dr. Langer explained that mindfulness isn't about clearing your mind. It's about noticing details, questioning assumptions, and staying curious. For example, instead of saying, "I always forget names," you could reframe it as, "Sometimes I remember names and sometimes I don't." That small shift opens up space for improvement.
I love that. It's almost like we create our own barriers sometimes. If you believe you're frail or incapable, you start acting that way, even if it's not true. But if you stay curious and open to learning, you keep your brain sharp and your body active.
Let's break down some of the key takeaways from Dr. Langer's research. First, aging isn't just about biology. It's also about perception. How we view ourselves and our environment plays a huge role in how we experience aging.
Second, Staying physically and mentally active is crucial. Whether it's learning a new skill, solving puzzles, or trying something completely out of your comfort zone, keeping your brain engaged helps stave off cognitive decline.
And third, don't let societal stereotypes dictate how you age. Society often tells us that getting older means slowing down, losing independence, or becoming irrelevant. But Dr. Langer's work shows that doesn't have to be the case. By challenging those narratives, we can redefine what it means to grow older.
One of my favorite takeaways is the idea of embracing uncertainty. Life is unpredictable, especially as we age. But instead of resisting change, we can learn to adapt and thrive. That's such a powerful mindset shift. And Huberman highlighted this too. He talked about how resilience comes from leaning into discomfort rather than avoiding it.
So, how can listeners apply these ideas to their own lives? Here are a few practical tips inspired by Dr. Langer's work.
Reframe challenges. If you need glasses or a cane, see them as tools for independence rather than signs of weakness.
Stay socially connected. Build and maintain relationships. It's one of the best ways to boost emotional well-being.
Practice gratitude. Focus on what you can do rather than dwelling on what you've lost.
Try something new. Whether it's picking up a hobby, traveling, or learning a language, novelty keeps your brain sharp.
And finally, remember that aging is a mindset. You don't have to buy into the stereotypes. Instead, focus on staying curious, engaged, and open to possibilities. Oh, and if you haven't already, check out Dr. Langer's episode on the Huberman Lab podcast. It's a goldmine of information.
You know, Mike, listening to Dr. Langer's work gives me so much hope. It reminds me that growing older doesn't mean giving up on growth. It's just a different chapter of life, full of opportunities to learn and evolve.
Couldn't agree more, Jess. And honestly, this episode has made me rethink some of my own assumptions about aging. Maybe I'll sign up for that University of the Third Age class I've been putting off.
There you go. That's the spirit. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and leave us a review. It helps us reach more listeners like you. Until next time, stay mindful and keep thriving.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.